All right.
We are.
We'll call to order this work session of the Nettle Creek School Board. Show all members present with the exception of Mr. Banning and Mrs. Houghton.
Yes.
Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Moment of silence.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Give. All right, we'll begin our work session to discuss revenue and expenditures of the 2026 budget and future year budgets. And I will first turn it over to Mrs. Schaefer to kind of give us an overview and reminder of what the purpose of this meeting is.
Okay, so this is a follow-up work session from last week's work session. Before we get started, if you board members and directors, administrators could speak up when you talk, because it is live streamed and recorded, there was some challenges in hearing during when you went back to watch the recording last time. And so we wanted our comments to be heard, so just try to speak up for us tonight. So again, this is a follow-up from our work session last week. Last week we talked about just the current financial standing of Nettle Creek schools. When we summarize the education fund looking forward based on the estimated revenue and the anticipated expenditures, we need to cut $623,000 out of expenditures from the education budget. When we, which we will talk about tonight as well, we didn't get to last week, but when we think about our operations budget, if the state circuit breaker estimate is correct and we spend all of our 2026 appropriation, our cash balance will drop about $300,000 in operations, only leaving us a cash balance of $122,000. And so that is cutting roughly $300,000 out of operations expenditures tonight. We also discussed in a time where our goal is to right size the district to continue providing high quality educational opportunities for students based on our current financial realities. And we also discussed visible guaranteed savings versus potential savings. Savings that we can associate a number to say that is going to be a savings rather than a hopeful anticipated savings for things like energy or natural gas that aren't as controllable for savings. So that's where we are. I will turn it over at this point for board member questions, comments, follow-up from last week's work session.
Yeah, so we had, what about 2.5, 3 hours of discussion last week. And I know kind of after the fact, sleeping on things and the days following, you think of things that maybe questions could have asked or additional thoughts. So that would be kind of the purpose of this first section, would be anything that's come up since then. If you had additional questions, I know some have come across email. If you want to reiterate those in the public setting or ask, any comments or anything, that would be kind of the purpose of this first section. Have anything they want to bring up before we get into new topics? I'll start with one. So Scott, you had mentioned last time that we were talking about concessions and expenses, things like that. You had mentioned, you'd seen the cost of food along with a lot of other things going up over the years. I think you said seen food increases of 20%.
Yes, sir.
My question that kind of came up afterwards was, have we increased our concession prices along with that?
In some areas, yes, and then that's the plan is to move forward by increasing some of the prices, because we do hear a lot that our prices are lower.
Yeah, and that was kind of,
Yeah, we are-
along with my thoughts too. I think it's a great thing for
Yeah.
school as well, but
Well, and it's,
notice that we are quite a bit cheaper and a lot of things really than some other schools. So not that I want to, completely increase everything, but I do want to appropriately,
the
pricing things so that we're not.
increased the most were the things that we've already increased.
Okay.
But we do feel like hamburger, open price, and popcorn for $1, we can make more. So I mean,
Sure.
schools. That's right. Ways we can increase profits. We've streamlined the process, and the concession stand eliminated a lot of products that didn't bring a big return, and we've eliminated a ton of waste over the years and done a really good job of tracking that. So just streamlining the process and maybe increasing the prices a little.
Kind of along those lines, and I don't expect an answer here and now and even tonight, but would be interested in seeing just kind of what the profitability of concessions are and kind of have some visibility there, being that is one of the only ways, along with ticket sales, that we're really bringing in money to pay for a lot of the athletic stuff. So
I actually have a kind of a breakdown I can show you afterwards or whatever.
Okay.
Both the athletic account and the concession account as far as expenses, what's coming in quarterly, what's going out quarterly, and where we're at there.
okay. Yeah, it'd be good to see. Board members. Yeah.
One of the things that I had received in an email was it was more of a statement. And so I wanted to bring it up to just maybe make sure we're adding some clarification to it, because I've heard this from a couple of sources, that at the last work session, there was a lot of discussion around elementary, not a lot about high school, which was it was being reviewed. We had sort of discussed it, but not in detail because we're still waiting for the details. So that's the point I want to make. Just a reminder, everything's on the table. Everything is being looked at. It takes a little longer. It's not as straightforward. So it takes a little longer to dive into some of the numbers and things like that to make it make sense. So just want to remind everybody that no final decisions. This is really just a matter of trying to work through the process, and that everything is being looked at. So, the other thing that came up was, I think, it was really just a question about operations, and obviously that's on the agenda for tonight. So those are two of the things that came up, just to reiterate.
Anything else?
I know.
Okay. Anything from this end of the table? I'm good. Okay. I guess final item from me then, and this is more, I guess, just to initiate discussion and get a little bit of information on. I know several years ago, we had adjusted our time off with the Teachers Association contracts and combined what used to be PTO and sick days, combine that to one number with PTO. And I think some of that has contributed to what we see from, a need for subs and the permanent subs. And it also, it's kind of a cost to us, as all of those days now can carry over from one year to another that are unused, whereas before it was just the sick days. So there's a lot of detail there. I don't want to gloss over that, but just wanted to, I guess, highlight that, that's a cost for us, and maybe something that we need to revisit and see if, that decision several years ago was the right thing to do and continue to do, or if there are other options around that.
Yeah, I think that is a huge perk to our teachers, for 18 PTO days throughout the year to use. I would have to go back in my notes, but I believe there was a superintendent study done where PTO days for teachers were looked at, and 18 is significantly higher than the state average. Again, that was a bargainable decision and a perk to teachers, but it does come at a cost, because now you're paying not only the time off for teachers, but you're also paying for substitute teachers as well.
Yeah, and I raise it not to suggest that it's something that we could do immediately as a cost saving benefit, but something just to keep an eye on and potentially revisit going forward.
One thing I would maybe touch back on, it came up about how our school meals are handled. Can you provide us more information on that?
Mhm. Yeah, so I believe that came up in public comment about looking at the lunch fund and other areas. The lunch fund is like our preschool fund. It is a self-sustaining fund. And so we do not use any educational dollars or operational dollars for Chartwell services, those employees' expenses related to school food. So any change in that fund line, it's a separate fund line, does not impact education or operations, budgets, expenditures, revenue.
Other questions or comments from last meeting? If not, we will move into tonight's discussion on operations. Do we want to start with any topic in particular?
Well, I can jump in if you would like and go from there. Or you guys can lead us by questions. However you would like.
Fire away and then we'll build off of what you.
Okay, so one of the things we talked about that does impact the operations budget is busing transportation for vocational, and Mr. Ballmer and I worked on, rough estimates on what that would cost. Because right now we are sending a bus to Newcastle for vocational. In the morning, it goes to Newcastle and back, and then it makes 2 midday trips over and back, and then at the end of the day, it goes over and back. So essentially, I think Sean said last time, 8 trips to Newcastle for our vocational students. And what is that cost collectively? 31,000, Mr. Ballmer, I believe. I have the 2 numbers separated. What is that number?
Roughly 33.
33,000 to transport how many kids roughly?
8 to 10.
8 to 10. And I think this year that is a larger number than normal. And so one of the things that we talked about is there opportunities for our students to ride share with other students in the vocational program? Are there other opportunities where we're not paying a bus driver to additionally to make that route? Is there opportunities for us to take on that routing if it was needed? Because I hate to deny a kid a vocational opportunity just because they don't have transportation. I would hope that most kids could maybe ride share, but if that is not an option, could we work on thinking, outside of the box on what can we do with our already resources that are established between the 8:30 to 3:30 day? And could that be an option rather than tacking on that additional cost? Do you have any thing I forgot on that, Mr. Ballmer?
So
Remind me, how many total students do we have going to vocational?
I do not know that all.
I mean, when I was on the board a few years, the vocational board a few years ago, I remember that number being around 70, but I don't know if that's still the same.
I could just give you
That's bad memory too.
a post estimate on what we transport. I couldn't tell you what we.
I'm just trying to get a picture of, okay, there's 8 or 10 that need
I would say 8.
out of?
I would say roughly 8 in the morning, and then for the morning vocational, same number in the afternoon. But as far as an overall number, I don't know vocational wise.
Trying to get an idea how many were
Total.
reporting themselves.
So Mrs. Schaefer, do you know about how many are in vocational school?
I do not off the top of my head, sorry.
And then do we know what the other schools who utilize the vocational school, what they're doing with transportation?
I do not.
Okay. Because that might be helpful to know.
Yeah,
how we
I can
line
figure
up.
that out. I would say just off the top of my head, it's probably about a 50-50. Some do, some don't. But I can get a clear answer on that.
And it's only transportation to the Newcastle facility, correct? Not
Correct. We
Mike's
do
Town.
not, right.
Okay.
So if we have a student in the radio and broadcasting that is housed at Knightstown, we do not provide transportation there. It is only to Newcastle Career Center and back.
Related to this and applies to really all of the several of the situations where we've got transportation needs for small number of students. And I think we've talked about this before, but I don't remember the specifics. The school used to have a minivan, I think, and was used for various things, but what are the restrictions or requirements around, if we did have something that's maybe more economical, like, a smaller car or a minivan as opposed to a bus, is that even an option? Who can drive that, and what are the requirements around transporting kids? Or
For our current numbers, yes, a minibus would be an option. And the driving requirements are substantially less to take a minibus over, you don't have.
well, I'm talking even
15 passenger van.
even small. We used to have a minivan, an eight passenger minivan years ago, lots of years ago.
Is every bus diesel that we have?
No, the minibuses are all gas.
So I would assume that, but we would need to verify. I would assume that just driving requirements for the minibus would be the same as an 8-passenger van. Maybe even a little less. We need to have their driver's license on record. We would need to run them through insurance. I don't know if they would have to take a course. Is that course specific to a minibus, or is that there probably is some sort of training they would need to do. But as far as ability to where you can take kids, you could take from school to school. You would not want to use a 8-passenger van, which I don't think we would in this case. I'm trying to think of a scenario to take a student from school to home, like a bus route. Then we need to put them on a large bus.
What about, like, we've got 2 kids to pick up at the Meyer parking lot, like we've done? I know we've got more than that currently, but something like that, is that an option here? I'm just trying to think of all the ways that you could potentially use a vehicle like that.
Mm-hmm.
I know I think they used to, they used to use it to, like, transportation to training and things like that, rather than
Yeah.
driving personal cars.
Yeah, so I think instead of paying mileage, I know other school corporations have a van or an SUV or something, and instead of paying mileage for people who go to training or whatnot, they take the corporation vehicle.
Yeah, other county schools, I know Lincoln goes south, but there's Northeastern and Centerville, go to Newcastle or Connersville.
Winchester,
Winchester.
Northeastern is Winchester.
For
Richmond.
Vocation,
Richmond.
Richmond. There's,
I was just thinking if there was a way.
Connersville.
Everybody.
they go both, I guess.
That's at different schools, but that's.
I would think that if we're going to do that, we would need some type of an analysis between the cost of maintaining a vehicle in our fleet to the cost of utilizing a vehicle that's already in our fleet. And I only bring that up because I remember at the bank, there was a time we had a fleet of vehicles for those purposes. And we went back and analyzed the costs associated with maintaining, which included insurance and maintenance and just all of the things that you needed to maintain with that vehicle, and having somebody doing that, which we have that, but it ended up being more cost effective using rental cars than it was to have something added in our fleet. And so it's continued that process. Now that's been probably 15 years ago now, so I don't know if that's still true, but we did discover that after a period of time. But that, we'd have to look at it both ways and
Yeah,
see if that makes sense.
I mean, it may
But it
not
could
a
be.
benefit, but if it's,
It could be.
and I realize it's an upfront cost too, to acquire it, but then if we're saving so much, how long would it take to return that? But just a thought.
Jason, the trips to the vocational school, are you using a full-size bus or a minibus?
So in the morning and afternoon, the driver uses a full-size bus, and midday, driver uses a minibus. The cost difference in fuel compared to gas and diesel fuel right now is substantially higher than gas. The buses and the minis are not too far off. They're within a couple mile per gallon. So I would say that using the minis is probably a little bit cheaper way,
There's a specific reason why a full-size bus is being used in the morning?
just driver preference.
Make mention of picking up kids, this kind of a little bit off of vocational, but outside of our normal bus routes, where do we go outside of that we're picking up kids that aren't in our district?
So
I'm prepared for that. Let me.
outside of our, how many kids, where do we go outside of our?
We need all the kids that we get, because driving to Meyer every day, twice a day, is the juice worth the squeeze to, where do we? I'm just asking that where we're going, how we're going about it, is it profitable?
There you go.
So right here is this purple, I know it's hard for people to see, but this purple here is our district boundaries. Okay, we have 70 Richmond right here. Here's Industries Road. We have Newcastle over here. We have, this is 1 and 36 right here. Blutsville is over here, and this is 40. All of these colored lines. So we are going down to Cambridge City area. We are going clear into Newcastle. We are going to Blutsville. We are going into Modoc. We are going, obviously, 29 kids on the Richmond bus at Meyer, and everywhere in between.
So 29, we pick up 29 kids at Meyer.
We do.
That's it.
So our,
Send 2 buses to the Cambridge, Dublin, Milton.
So those parents just come to a centralized pickup spot then?
No, not all. There are a couple group pickup areas, and that's something that we looked at, that we've talked about as well, is having more group pickups. A little bit of what makes that a little bit challenging is if there's certain areas that don't have sidewalks and kids can't walk a sidewalk to the group pickup. So that makes that a little bit challenging. But doing more group pickups is something that expectation for sure.
we have 39 students that their home district is Richmond Community Schools. And ADM currently is 7,345.33. That is 286,467.
Those are all picked up at Meyer.
Not all of them. Mm-mm.
Meyer is the only bus stop that we do make. In Richmond.
While we're on the topic of transportation, did you want to touch on the transportation costs that go towards athletics?
Yeah, this one was a little bit more challenging because I don't know that it's a full encompassing picture. And if you're going to analyze athletics, I feel like we should also be analyzing ECAs as well, for FFA, band, field trips, whatever it may be. So we just did a rough estimate, and you have to take into consideration fuel costs and driver costs. In athletics, it's challenging because you have to look at a 2-year analysis, because 1 year we're home, 1 year away most of the time. And so we roughly figured from 24 to 25, not completely accurate because we switched to a new TransFinder routing system, that it would probably be 10,500 in fuel, and in driver cost, about 300 trips. And I'm not saying that's all athletics. I'm not sure what the breakdown was there or if we've encompassed all of it, but 300 trips in the budget year 2025, and a 4-hour trip, the driver cost is $71.92. If you think about an athletic event, if you think about a field trip, if you think about a band contest, they are significantly more than 4 hours. But 4-hour cost we just did. So this is a bare minimum. That with 300 trips, it's 21,576 minimum in driver wages. And so that's in a total very approximated minimal cost of 31,000. And I wouldn't just say athletics, probably ECAs and athletics total. But probably not all encompassing from the rough reports that we pulled. I think that's probably an area where we identified that we need a better tracking system so that we can separate out and see a true cost of ECAs, athletics, what's the fuel cost, what's the driver cost, all of that stuff.
I would agree with you that all the ECAs should be looked at. The band, I do agree, band, FFA.
Yeah, I think it's something that we have to
To look at.
consider, not just if we're going to look at how can we offset some of that cost, not just looking at athletics, but then also maybe having that same expectation for ECAs and clubs and things that use our busing as well.
So would then that warrant looking at, like, I think there's a $10 fee right now assessed for transportation with athletics. Whether we land on that number or not, that's, whatever that is, but would it make sense that that same type of fee be applied to all ECAs that require transportation? Because that's a big number.
On the fuel cost side of things, it's also makes it more challenging when fuel costs are so volatile and they change so much. I've been talking this week with 3 different fuel supply companies about ways to save money, and one of the options is possibly going to contracted fuel instead of just cash prices. When they deliver fuel, it's whatever that fuel price is that day is what we pay. Like on the contract side of things, if they can sell us we'll say 10,000 gallons of fuel at $4 a gallon. And we make that contract for 3 months. If in that first month, fuel drops to $3 a gallon. Okay, yeah, we know we're gonna need more fuel, so we contract another 10,000 gallons at $3 a gallon. And now your 20,000 gallons ends up being $3.50 a gallon. That makes sense. Which would make it easier to estimate what the fuel costs could possibly be, for these events. Right now, we're just kind of at mercy of what fuel costs are at the time when we get filled up.
I don't know, I guess in my thinking, that trying to reach a break even for transportation cost, and charging students, for some of that is necessary, but maybe just a, little bit of revenue to help relieve some of the pressure in the operations could be a solution. If that makes sense, but I think Mr. Snodgrass did some comparison. So the $10 is what we charge just athletics right now. So we think about the 30,000 and what athletics is charging right now at $10 per athlete per season, and that generates how much revenue?
This year it generated 6,580.
That gets transferred from athletics to operations. If you increase that from $10 to
25, it's 16,450. I went the 30, 19,740, and then 40 was 26,320.
other things that I think we need to consider, and that's just athletics, if we apply the same to all ECAs. Other things that we consider is, does then that transportation cost become a barrier for students to then participate? I know Mr. Snodgrass has graciously, if a student hasn't paid, what he does is he just says, how many athletes do you have? He multiplies that by 10 and he transfers it. And we don't deny students that, but I think it may become a little bit more challenging if we increase that cost as well. Something I just think that we need to be mindful of.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be increased a little bit. I mean, $10 to $20. I don't want to increase anything to parents, but I think that's reasonable. I think it's going to have to be a combination of things. And, I would like to get to the point where I think ECAs are a little, or I'm sorry, non-athletic ECAs are a little more tricky because they don't have revenue coming in like athletics do with ticket sales and concessions generally. I know there's fundraising and things like that, but, I'd like to get to where you mentioned, when you inherited it, athletics was paying for transportation, kind of got away.
Paid 1 year.
Okay.
He said they asked him for 3 years.
Said it may come back. I mean,
we were also $7,000 in the red in athletics and 2,000 in concessions in athletics.
Yeah.
The year I took over.
So obviously the goal isn't to return to that situation, but I'd like to, I know it's not an overnight thing either, but work towards the point where it, for the most part, covering the transportation and possibly custodial costs that are directly going towards athletics. And that can be through a series of increases in that student fee, but not completely through increases in that student fee. I think we need to look at other places where we can streamline and make some cuts ourselves, as far as, what we pay for what used to be volunteer services at, athletic events and things like that. So I think it's just got to be a combination of things. I don't think it can come from any one place. I think that's got to be our goal.
I think probably opportunity for kids that maybe don't have the money could work in the concessions.
Right.
To offset that amount we have, you know, if we're paying other people to work there and a student doesn't have $10, come work a shift at the concession stand.
Take tickets or, yeah.
Take your tickets, offset it.
Mr. Snodgrass, do you know what other area county schools are doing in a particular area? They charge a transportation fee to their athletes?
I looked at Lincoln, Centerville, Union County, Northeastern, Shenandoah, Union City, Tri, Monroe Central, Winchester, Seton, and Eastern Hancock, and only Eastern Hancock charges a one-time pay to play.
Pay to play, yeah.
Yes, it's not.
One annual pay to play, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's where I'll leave it. I think it needs to be a combination of things. I just don't want to throw everything back on the parents because some sports are, you know, pretty well covered as far as fundraising, generating what they need to for their supplies and things like that. And I know others, you know, it may be $120 an athlete to pay that just to go towards, I don't know what it is, practice uniforms or whatever. And that can be maybe it's a choice of not doing the fundraising and choosing to pay for it, but still those are costs to the parents that just don't want to keep tacking it on.
I will throw this out. I showed this to Emily. Mrs. Schaefer, sorry. An ECA here within the school, a booster, not Tiger Booster, but sent out a letter to businesses asking for donations anywhere from $250 to $1,000. And in the letter, it specifically said part of that money was going to go to transportation costs, and the ECA doesn't contribute. So that I find that a little concerning. But again, I feel like we need to look at all ECAs.
Anything else on transportation you wanted to cover or highlight?
Jason, how many gallons of fuel do we go through in a year?
I got with Keystone and I haven't spoke with Falmouth yet. In 2023, we went through roughly 35,000 gallons of diesel fuel and 10.
Mr. Balmer, do you have any other transportation?
On the vehicle maintenance, not buses. After speaking with Charlie, we think we can cut some money out of that appropriation. With the two newer trucks, the upkeep and maintenance on those two trucks are substantially less than the one truck, the older truck that we have. So we think that just based off of what we spent this year and what we see needing parts wise and stuff for those trucks, that we could cut some money out of that account. Vehicle servicing and maintenance, potential service for some potential savings there with a lot of the newer buses that we have now, and some of the older buses that are in the fleet being decommissioned. We're working on parting those out to save costs on some of the parts that we need for the remaining older buses in the fleet. We think with the newer buses and a lot of the repairs and stuff being able to be covered under warranty on those buses, that we can that we may have some potential savings in the servicing of the newer buses.
So what that looks like is within our operations fund and all of the line items and all of the appropriations, let's say hypothetically between those two line items, he can say, I think we can cut $7,000 out of appropriations for budget year 2026. So that would be guaranteed savings. We could take 300,000 and commit to decreasing those appropriations at 7,000. Now we have 293,000 more to find. What we would not be able to do is hope that we can cut $5,000 out of those two line items, not change our appropriations, because if we get to the end of budget year 26 and we've spent that money, it's not a guaranteed savings then.
I can't guarantee that our remaining, older buses won't eventually need costly emissions repairs, fuel system repairs. With those older buses, the repairs on the emissions and the fuel systems are costly on them.
I would even say, as you think about the operations budget as a whole and other areas where we may be able to look at and potentially save in the future, is natural gas. We've been talking about our natural gas and potentially joining a consortium to sort of control, at least budget a little bit better for that anticipated cost. We received that February bill for natural gas, and it was 3 times as much than what we have ever paid for natural gas in the last 3 years. And so a 3-year analysis says that had we been part of the consortium, we could have saved roughly $55,000 on our natural gas cost. But that is a savings, and it helps you. Being part of the consortium is going to help you budget a little bit better, because you're not going to have that huge influx in a one-off month or whatnot that wasn't really in your budget. But again, it's not guaranteed, because like Mr. Balmer said, there is going to be some fluctuation in that natural gas cost each time your consortium takes that out for bid. Same with energy. We can look at some ways to reduce some of those costs. But it's when we talk about that guaranteed and can put a number on paper and say X amount is going to be cut out of our budget, it's a little bit more challenging in some of those areas.
Jason, do you see fuel efficiency with these newer buses? Is it at any sort of advantage over the older buses?
I can't tell you that we haven't tracked mileage and miles per gallon on those. Some of the older buses, they don't use the DEF system. If you're familiar with the diesel exhaust fluid, the newer buses do. So I'd have to look at it. The cost of an older bus may use more fuel, but then you have the cost of the DEF for the newer buses. So
Makes a pre-def piece of equipment. I think.
it does in the farm world for sure. On the fuel prices side of things, when I was talking to just Keystone about contracts, he goes, I can give you a price today, and tomorrow it's going to be different. Because every day the price changes.
Sean, anything else on transportation? Jason, anything else?
No, probably so.
We touched on custodial a little bit as it relates to athletics. Do you want to go there next, since it kind of related? Did you have anything there on efficiencies or?
On the custodial side of things, I think we've got quite a few part-time positions. I think that we can evaluate those and see if there's any areas that we could make potential improvements there.
I think it's carving out the time like we did with elementary positions, like we did with junior, senior high school positions. It's doing that same thing with custodial positions, with technology positions, any positions, to see, where have we just gotten into a routine where a position is open and we just filled it? And is there room to get a little bit more creative and eliminate some of those employee costs? That is a guaranteed savings. You can take that number and put it on a math equation to see. And so I think it's carving out some time to look into that as well, which we've kind of started. Just haven't fully committed.
What's our total number of custodians?
Oh, we've got,
That's a hard question to answer as well. Because we have a couple of positions, I'll get you started and then you can jump in. You're okay. Because we have a couple of positions where they drive a bus, morning and afternoon route. One of the positions drives the midday vocational route or preschool route. They also spend a few hours doing custodial work. Another one is an instructional assistant at the elementary, drives the bus morning and afternoon, and on breaks, holiday breaks and summer breaks is helping in our custodial department. So that creates a little bit of a challenge to get a true number. We have several part-time positions. Some of those part-time positions are, mowing that's seasonal. We have 2 student workers right now that are on a paid position that their hours kind of fluctuate based on their availability after school. And then we have some evening part-time custodial workers. But then we also have obviously full-time custodians, a head custodian at the high school, a head custodian at the elementary school, and then how many other full-time positions do you think we have, Jason?
Four full-time positions at the elementary and 4 full-time positions at the high school.
I mentioned this earlier, but I think what we need in order to compare ourselves to other schools, we need to track not necessarily people or what we're calling positions, but track them as full-time equivalents, FTEs. So, if somebody is a full-time equivalent being what is our
40
hours? Okay. Being 40 hours. So if we have a person that's doing 10 hours a week of custodial work in addition to other stuff, well, they're 1/4 of an FTE.
Mhm.
It's working 20 hours a week, they'd be a half FTE. So that way we can add those up and see how many full-time equivalents we have as compared to, other schools and also look at the number of buildings they have, square footage, students, all those kind of attributes to try to get as close as we can to apples. It's never going to be perfect, but see where we are as far as coverage.
When you call them 8 full-time, 4 and 4, is that year round?
Yes.
How many part-time do you have, Jason? Do you know off the top of your head?
4, 5 currently. Well, that doesn't count. But we got 2 more with work.
Plus 2 student workers. And then I would call 2 positions at 0.25.
The head custodians at each building, just outside of custodial work, they'll do some repairs, drinking fountain repairs and flush house toilets, lights. They'll do some of the what I say minor repairs. We're not a day-to-day basis changing motors on air handlers and work like that. Not that we're not capable of doing it, but that's not a day-to-day thing.
Are there opportunities? I'm sure this is gonna be true in every department when we look at it. Are there opportunities for some of the work-based learning? To help us out with that, because that's gonna be a definite need for us.
I worked with Ms. Palmer to create a couple job descriptions to send over as well. We've also done the same thing in our technology department. So while those would be unpaid positions, they're still gaining work experience and skill and work-based learning credit for that. So is a positive.
One with Charlie as well, as a mechanic, one with Charlie.
Mhm. Yes, there are opportunities there. We do the same thing for preschool, and I believe at the elementary, some come down to help with as an assistant position, but sometimes it's only a couple hours for the day, just depending on when they're available.
The custodian. And or you have someone totally in charge of?
We had two custodians that would mow. And then we have two current bus drivers that midday will mow in between routes. And myself when I can get away from the desk. So
What do you anticipate you spend a week mowing grass? I mean,
Are you talking collectively?
I'm just curious.
Hours or money?
Are you talking collectively?
hours,
Yeah, I mean, I'm just
hours wise,
how to measure. It's not in acres. You can't do it in acres. I mean, you've got, what's the time commitment to someone on a mower?
It's okay to say.
I would,
You don't have to.
You're doing math in your head.
I would say 16, just rough estimate, 16 to 20 hours total. But that doesn't include the volunteer that is mowing Pike Hill either. He spends 8 hours mowing that hill. Volunteers his time, his machine. Just had a conversation with him today, thanking him and telling him how much we appreciate him doing that. I mean, that's a big chore.
There's a lot of grass.
That hillside that's a lot of grass.
Especially that, if you do that on there, it really bump it up.
I can get you a more accurate.
It was more out of curiosity about the time commitment we pay someone to be on there. Is there anything else, Jason, that you see in what's underneath you to be improved more efficiently? See it every day. I said, you see it every day, so.
A lot of things that I see and a lot of it comes with, repairs and initial costs. I mean, it's not just hey, we can do this and save money. We're gonna have to spend money to save that money. With the age of the buildings and some of the equipment and it's never beneficial typically to wait. Typically repairs always end up costing more if you wait. Unfortunately, we don't have the luxury to be able to do everything that we need to do right when that happens. So sometimes we do have to wait. But yeah, I mean, there's lots of ideas to possibly save money, but there's always an initial cost to get to that.
I'll point out too, I don't remember numbers off the top of my head, but last year, maybe a little bit earlier than the year than this, we were having a lot of these same conversations on the operations fund and doing some streamlining where we could there, recognizing that we're heading in overspending direction within operations at that point. So, I mean, I recognize that you've already done some cuts and streamlining where we could there, and it just gets harder and harder to find additional areas when
Yeah.
I've already done that exercise.
You can only cut so much before you can't maintain something.
And then we're in even worse shape when things are out of repair. So
It's just that where we, since I've been here, we are trying to utilize what we have labor wise to make repairs and not utilize contractors near as much.
Every penny counts when we're trying to get to these numbers, and it's challenging to make cuts, but there's 3,700 that we can cut right away that are just appropriations that were there for things like promotion of the school, advertising, staff relations. Can eliminate those, and we just don't have dollars to spend for those out of the operations, and look for other ways to fund those. When we think about staff relations from a district perspective, one of my goals has been to use our annual fundraiser as an opportunity not only to pay for our end of year staff banquet, but for other things that we want to have some funds to do different things with for our staff and employees. And so not committing operational dollars to that, but just taking that out and fundraising for those types of things. Promotion of the school, it was minimal, and advertising. This year we have only spent $60 to support the Little League and have a banner out there, but that could easily come from another fund that isn't educational or operations, where we're raising money some way, or we reevaluate those things too. Very minimal, but they are areas, every penny counts when you're trying to get to those numbers. I want to kind of jump into the technology department, if that's okay. Mr. Albert lives in a very interesting world, because I want to clarify from the last week's work session when I made the comment that technology was in operations. That's not 100% factual. Part of technology is in operations, and part of technology is in education fund. So in operations, he's going to go into it in more detail, but things in operations are going to be things like copiers, licensing that's not directly related to teaching and learning. The part of his department that falls in the education budget would be his personnel, his staffing, and also licensing and subscriptions and software that are directly related to education. We have worked very hard, because we, have already been making some of the cuts that we have seen from loss of funding and operations just from budget year 24-25 into 26. And so I would say over the past couple of years, he has made some significant gains in cutting in his area. But again, still evaluating that aspect as well to see where we can cut more. So Braden, I don't know if you want to share a little bit more in depth about your department.
Yeah, where to begin? So this past summer, we sold all of our old MacBooks and iPads. I know I've glossed over this once before, but that generated the school $72,719 in revenue. So we were able to offset that much cost of our new purchase with the sale of those devices. we've made adjustments, got creative with some of our licensing, and with Adobe to save about $600 annually. Just moving our asset management system from what we had prior to January 1st to now saved us $8,107 per year just because of the cost of that software. We transitioned our server infrastructure to something different, which saved us $6,343 annually in a software subscription fee. So we're doing that all in-house now and have no support contract anymore. By switching to state-provided CrowdStrike endpoint protection, so antivirus, anti-malware, that saves us about $1,500 a year across the district. We converted all of our elevator lines from standard analog lines over to cellular. That saves us about $1,400 a year. Altogether, I've got about $19,000 in the last year. Not all that's been super fun to do either. We really enjoyed our asset management system and ticketing system, but at a $10,000 renewal, it just wasn't, we weren't getting out of it what we needed to. It wasn't getting utilized like it should have been. That's really nobody's fault, but it was too much. So looking ahead, we went out to bid this year for our internet contract. That was up for past the 5-year renewal. So we went out to bid for that. And over the next year, we will save about $7,500 annually on our internet, just because the cost has been reduced in internet over the last 5 years. So definitely some savings. I mean, I lost $20,000 just off the top of our software budget this year. So I knew I had to start making some cuts. The biggest one straight out of the gate was the asset management. Our next big ticket items are Power School. Obviously, we can't do without. That usually goes up a couple percent every year. That's a per student cost. So we get looked at once per year by Power School. They say, okay, you have X many students in your system that are active, and they send us a bill for that. Microsoft Office is probably the next something else that we just can't do without. And then we start looking at like our multi-factor authentication, Parent Square, all again, things that we see increases in every year, but we just can't carve it out. Our Parent Square is somewhere between 8 and 85. I know our renewal's just coming out for that. I've not actually gotten to see the number for it yet, though. And then our filtering suite for all MacBooks, Chromebooks, internet in general. That also includes the pass system that they utilize, like hall pass system they utilize at the high school, and the content aware tools. So if somebody's looking up something that is self-harm related, it's going to alert us. All that's included, and that's to the tune of about $10,600. Again, all things that we've kind of criticized and looked over, but usually see an increase in each year, but can't do a whole lot about it at the moment. In a nutshell, that's software. I mean, we spend $80,000, give or take, in software every year. Last year, we had about $91,600 in software costs. So we've definitely trimmed that. Then going into the next part. So what also comes out of education. So all of software, that side of software is kind of a combination of both operations and education. Everything hardware related does come out of the education fund. So we've purchased, our big purchase this year was our servers. We purchased refurbished servers versus going with new ones just to save a couple dollars. With the price hikes in RAM and the price hikes in hard drive and storage space, looking at new was off the table entirely. That was about $25,000, and I hope to get another 5 years out of those. looking at more of what's in operations. So we have all of our internet, all of our phones, cell phones, physical phones on the wall, the licensing for that, all of our consulting fees for our E-rate, and our backup internet for Starlink. All of that is coming out of the operations side. So that's a lot and a little bit, but just kind of a overview of what I'm working with.
Thank you.
Questions?
But streamlining you've already performed.
I mean, we're in a world of technology, and thank you for looking for those ways.
You have for staffing in your department.
So I have a tech at each building, and they're both full-time. I did some quick napkin math while Jason was talking, just to kind of see, how busy we've been just going back to January 1st in this ticketing system. So far this year, today, we've had 176 Chromebook repairs. 67 of those were at the high school and 109 were down here. So it's on average about 1.4 breaks per day. So stay pretty busy.
On that topic, I mean, are those in line with what we were anticipating? Switch back to Chromebooks, and are students generally satisfied with switching back?
I would say, and yeah, break rate, we knew it was going to go up versus iPad. The cases aren't as robust. And so we knew that going out of the gate. I mean, as far as if they've enjoyed them, yes. Taking care of them, that's a different conversation. There's been a lot of discussion of how devices are treated this year between myself, my staff, and teachers. So we opted to collect them this summer for that purpose, and probably will continue to do that moving forward. Pre-COVID, we collected every year. Post-COVID, up until this last year, just collecting them to sell, we let them keep them. And normally it wasn't a problem. We'd have a couple that we'd have to go chase down every summer, but just with the amount of breaks and like I said, just the conversation of taking care of their device, this year we've just decided to start getting a hold of them just to make sure we can make them last as long as we can.
Anything else for Braden? Have anything else from technology you wanted to highlight?
No.
Thanks, Braden.
Thank you.
Any thoughts on next topic? Yeah, we had given you some assignments from last time. Did you have some
Yep.
information you wanted to bring back to us?
Absolutely. I will start the rapid fire and you guys jump in with the questions. I'm gonna stay in operations first. And I had a question, I believe, from one board member just on how much we spend in transportation driver salaries alone. That number is 382,000. And so a large portion of our budget is transporting students. It kind of ties into the conversation with the cost of ECAs. That's as a whole. That is everything that we are paying bus driver salaries for, whether it's field trips, athletics, ECAs, or day-to-day travel. That number is 382,000. We do have some expense, very small, in overtime for maintenance salaries. That's about $10,000. That we already cut that appropriation down. We spent $13,000 in overtime salaries last year in the budget. We appropriated $10,000 this year. That's something that Mr. Balmer and I have really tried to work hard on, is not having to pay overtime salaries for silly things, but being very conscious of when is overtime hours absolutely needed in his department. So we do pay overtime for snow removal, salting walks, because that has to occur outside of the contractual day for his department. So that our facilities are ready to go for school day, for athletic events when that weather hits. Saturday sporting events, weekend events such as graduation. It's hard to control those things sometimes. Emergencies outside of the normal work hours that you cannot control. We've had the fire alarm go off here at the elementary school twice, I believe past 9 o'clock. And so that warrants somebody coming in, figuring it out why it was tripped off or what the issue is, and then sometimes addressing that. And so it would be very hard to completely eliminate, obviously, overtime salaries, because if you have a pipe break on a Saturday evening, you're not going to let the water continue to run until Monday morning when somebody comes in on their contractual day. But I think just being more mindful around that area. So a couple other things that were either for me, I'm gonna jump back into the education fund now, unless there are comments around operations or questions. Okay, I'll jump back into the education fund, either through, public comment or board member follow-up from last time. Just, I wanted to give some information on a few things. The first one being our professional development model here at Nettle Creek. And so a few years ago, we made the decision to move to a more internal professional development model, giving teachers contracted professional development time each day. So that's 7:30 to 8:15 time. That is weekly professional development, and that is led by 2 of our master teachers, 1 at each building. What is the role of that master teacher? They plan that tailored professional development session for teachers based on our school and student needs. So that is investing directly back into improving teacher capacity and instructional excellence, student achievement within our school. Professional development. So what kinds of topics are they talking about? Because not everybody understands, like, yeah, you're spending time developing. What are you doing? So we do things around supporting teacher understanding of the evaluation rubric and the evaluation process. We've spent a lot of time this year in curriculum unit prep. I think there were at least 8 weeks at both buildings that we spent on that topic. And that was partially from teacher feedback, because when we get new curricular materials, we typically say, teachers, here are your materials. Here is a half-day professional development with the company, and then go be on your way. And so just a need to spend more time getting used to those curricular materials, the resources that they provide, aligning them to state standards, and updating those curriculum maps. We also did some professional development around differentiation. So the practice of tailoring instruction to meet individual student needs. Rather than using one size fits all, we are working with teachers to proactively plan varied ways students learn and how they show they have learned. The high school has spent a lot of time on PSAT and essay prep, focusing on integrating SAT and PSAT strategy into their daily instruction. That was led because all of our 9th, 10th, and 11th graders will take some form of SAT. And in the new accountability model, correct me if I'm wrong, Mrs. Tinkle, those will now be methods or avenues where students can show success towards our school letter grade. What else do our master teachers do besides lead professional development? They really support that deep dive into student data. So analyzing those standardized tests, the benchmarks, the formative assessments that our students are taking, and identifying those achievement gap areas, and then tailoring that professional development to close those achievement gaps. They help create and implement the school instructional plan and align professional development to that. And I would say their sole job is to coach up every single teacher and administrator in our district to ensure that our students continue to have high quality educational experiences. While they may not have students in their class, between the two of them, they deliver weekly instruction to 81 teachers and administrators in our district. You know, that's an investment. You know, paying 2 teachers to hyper focus around improving teacher capacity and coaching teachers up and coaching administrators and really hyper focusing on improving that student achievement. So that is an area that you could consider making some cuts. I would have a hard time doing that simply because I know the impact that we and the gains that we have been able to make. I always say our students deserve to leave here the absolute smartest that they can be. And if we remove that work, you know, who's going to pick up that work? Because I think it would be very challenging for our administrators to continue that work and do it to the level of detail and attention that it's done now. But that's my opinion. So I'm happy to answer questions around that. Like positions in other districts, I think ours is a little bit unique because we call them master teachers. But the position itself is not unique to Nettle Creek. Same thing as instructional coaches at other districts doing the same type of work. I would venture to say though, if we remove or change that professional development model, then I would want us to reconsider that scheduled professional development time 5 days a week. And consider going back to then instructional time with students. Because I don't know who is going to be able to lead weekly professional development for all teachers on top of their duties already assigned. Questions, comments about that?
I'm curious how often they're pulled to help with students or sub or other things.
I'm gonna defer to our principals for that question.
We utilize our master teacher in that role. You know, for an example, if there's something that's done in the cluster that maybe a teacher struggled with to understand or learn and wants that master teacher to assist them with the lesson, they'll push into that classroom and assist or even lead that instruction at times. We have had incidents where if we feel like a teacher needs some support and kind of some ideas and some goals that we place forward, the master teacher takes that lead, oftentimes assisting in classroom instruction. And ensuring kind of the ideas that we going over are met with our students. So
they stay busy every day, all day long throughout the entire school year.
I would say yes.
Well, those first 2 examples you gave, those are specific to coaching of the teacher.
Correct.
And, you know, when I think about coaching, then I have to look at Mr. Snodgrass. You know, we wouldn't put an athletic team on the field without a coach.
Correct.
Ever. And I've heard lots of athletes say that they owe their success largely to the dedication of the coaches that they've had around them. And I think about, well, what's the main thing that we do here? Because our main thing is not athletics. Our main thing here is education. So it kind of makes sense that we would spend the bulk of our time with those individuals coaching to help elevate, because that's how we get to student outcomes. I came from a world where everybody had a coach. So Anyway,
And oftentimes a master teacher will pull students when we're prepping for SAT or PSAT prep, or a kid needs a specific thing during study hall time. They would come into that, and that master teacher would work with them as well.
Pertaining to subbing, we very rarely ever pull them for subbing just because they have all of the other responsibilities. We have a unique position or a unique situation right now where we have Mrs. Chu has stepped into a kindergarten class and is finishing the year in there. She's graciously done so, but typically she would be working with helping classes test their students. Often, like first grade in particular, kindergarten, they have to do one-on-one testing, takes a lot of time. So they're there, assisting them with that, as well as, continuing to coach in whatever area they need to coach.
so I'm thankful that she's done that. So is there an accommodation for her? And I know she's in kindergarten, so that becomes really disruptive to those 6-year-olds. I don't know how to word this question. Is she still able to dedicate some of her master teacher time to doing some of those responsibilities to help ensure we still have the same commitment and focus? I'm not wording that correctly, but
Now we're kind of wrapping things up. Like this, for example, this week we've worked on the surveys that we have to do. What happens is the teachers, they're assigned a mentor, and then of course we have the master.
Right.
They take the surveys in order to, to share how they feel, give feedback as to how those mentor teachers or master teachers have performed. So that's what we're doing this week. Really, next week, we've got a lot of events going on, field day and all that good stuff. So we're wrapping things up the last few weeks.
I would say, if we were mid-year, any other part of the year besides
It worked.
the year, it would not work.
No,
and that's kind of where I was going with that.
no way.
Exception because of the time of year that it is.
The only reason why it works at this point, because otherwise I could not keep up with what she does. If it was, if someone said, okay, Locke, you take over, there's no way I could do what I do right now in
Right.
the office plus that and do it as well as she does.
Right. So I was just trying to think through this because I love the coach concept. All of the whole thing to me just kind of speaks my language. I came from that world, but anyway, so let's just kind of look at the other side of it. We would still have to have professional development, so that wouldn't go anywhere. And it wouldn't be in-house, so it wouldn't be as consistent, nor would it be as focused. But wouldn't we have to pay somebody to do it? So we'd have to pay a fee. We're back to Braden again, have to pay a fee to find somebody to, not necessarily Braden, this would be technology, but we'd be paying a fee to do that, which we're not because it's absorbed into that salary, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then we would also still have to have someone or ones to fill all those other gaps, reviewing surveys, reviewing test scores. So somebody would still be doing those things, or
I
just stop.
You would stop.
So we would no longer have access to the data.
You would, but we are hyper focused and we have set that school goal bar high because even 50% of our students passing math I learn in 6th grade, that's not the percentage. I'm just
Right.
or random
Hypotheticals.
facts. We have to do better. That means half of our kids are not proficient as demonstrated by iLearn. Same thing with iRead. If it's not 100%, we can do better. And so we have set the bar high. Maybe you get a different superintendent in here and they're not as aggressive. Go back to, I am passionate about our students leaving here the smartest they absolutely can. And our master teacher helps disseminate that data, analyze that data to say, here's where we have some gaps in the learning, and let me help you prepare on what we can do. It takes that workload off of the teacher to fix that, to give a better learning experience.
Right.
We can remove that, but there is no way we will be as hyper-focused as what we are able to be now on growing capacity of our leaders, of our teachers, and in improving learning opportunities for our students.
And that speaks to student outcomes, which is top of the list or priorities, and retention and attracting the very best educators that we have and that we can, and this helps to facilitate.
I mean, we're going to get a school letter grade by the end of 2026. And you bet, I said how many we are receiving from one district. You bet that that school letter grades, parents want to send their kids to the best school. They want to. So you bet that we are going to be compared to every other school. We're already fighting for the same kids, fighting for not enough kids. I think we have to continue to push ourselves to provide the best. Any other questions on that?
Not a question, but a comment. I mean, I think this one for me is tough because I'm sort of quantitative, I guess, generally, and this one's very much a qualitative benefit. And it's hard to put numbers on that. So I think that's where I am forced to rely on you and all of you to say this is a good enough benefit that it justifies the cost, and it's not a, what seems like on the surface a luxury, and we're getting our money's worth out of it. Because you can't look at the numbers and say, yeah, it makes sense, because they don't balance out. Yeah, there'd be some additional costs that we'd have to spend if we didn't have them on various things, but what else non-financially do we lose by not having that benefit? So
I like that idea. I can kick that around a little bit.
Math would say it is a direct impact on that school letter grade that she's talking.
yeah, and
You and I work well. You gotta see the numbers.
well, and I don't disagree. It's just like, okay, where do you draw the line though? I mean, you can throw money at everything, right? And hope for some improvement. But where do you get your return on investment? And what is that number?
And this investment goes directly correlates with our mission statement. Our corporation mission statement.
I don't disagree with any of that. Yeah. But like I said, it's not a decision that I feel comfortable with making complete. None of these are completely on my own, but at least others I can, see numbers on a piece of paper. And this one is very much relying on information from other people.
I think the way that you measure it, and that those trends are still coming, is in the student outcomes, is in the growth and development, and the skill sets that we have. That's how that's really the only way we can measure whether it's successful or not.
Yeah. And even with that, I mean, you have to somehow attribute it to that thing and not this other thing, so it's an art, not a science in some ways.
Yeah.
I have nothing else.
Another one, we talked about elementary class size analysis. Last time, we were able to spend some time looking at the junior, senior high school class size analysis. And if I can summarize it a little bit, it took me days because you have to map out the master schedule and then map out every single course that goes along with that master schedule, who's teaching what, and how many students are enrolled. And I want to put a disclaimer that the numbers that I was working off of are not finalized because our junior, senior high school team were still making some movements with students and courses. And so, Jordan, we said it was probably 85% finalized when I received the numbers from Mrs. Arnold. So it's still challenging.
Our vocational things haven't been input. Yeah, I would say somewhere between 75 to 85% of where we're at with it.
If you compare just, based off of enrollment numbers, and right sizing classes that we talked about last time. And so before I jump into junior, senior high school, I spoke with the administration at the elementary, and we did make one tweak on estimated class sizes for board consideration. K-3 would be 23 to 25 per class, 4-6 would be 25 to 28 per class. And so then my recommendation for 7-12 would be class sizes of 25 to 29 students per section. But I think we have to allow a little bit of administrative review of course enrollment lower than 25, and provide approval for some of those courses to run because they may need an elective course. They may need additional sections based on required course offerings, our vocational students. And so those would have to be approved by the principal. So just from a overview without getting into the weeds of the meat of it, but 22 of the approximate 183 course offerings at the junior senior high school have a class size of 25 students or more.
Can you say that again?
Yes.
22 of.
So when we talk about right sizing off of that 25 student minimum, there are 22 courses of the approximate 183 courses that meet that criteria. So when we say to our elementary class sizes, 4-6, you need to have 25 or 28 students in a class before we will consider another section. There are only 22 of our courses at the junior senior high school that would meet that same expectation. The average class size, again, I don't know that it's comparing apples to apples, but trying to just look at it through different ways. The average class size currently is 18. Some of the classes are very low class sizes. When we look at staffing and where there might be some opportunity for right sizing, I do think there are opportunities in the 26-27 school year. When we look at certified staff and maybe potential other opportunities as we transition to the new diploma type, but also look at course offerings in the future. When you just compare apples to apples, it's not really a good comparison. Mr. McCaslin, any additional thoughts, comments on course offerings?
There's a lot of factors that go into the schedule that it's hard to compare, but yes, I understand where we're at. I believe some of our classes can be larger. I think we've had the luxury of having more sections over the course and having those options for kids. If you only have 3 sections of something, for an example, a 7th grade English, you have 3 sections of that. That gives that kid, there's more sections now we can have of math. That kid can have a section here if they want to be in the band. If band's only offered at 1 section for junior high, it's going to be hard if there's only 2 sections of a certain class. Because if they want to be in an honors class, there's only going to be 1 section of that may have to run at the exact same time as an elective offering if they're choosing. That's made the complicated thing with the junior senior high scheduling. So, but I obviously understand where we're at, and we'll work with that.
What does it primarily mean? And maybe it's not primarily anything, it's a combination of everything, but if we do get class sizes to where they need to be, at least in the majority of time, does that mean not offering certain courses, or is it truly just fewer sections of the same course?
Fewer sections of the same course, but then I think you look at if there isn't a certain number, do we offer that course? That gets you to that. It allows you more sections of the one that are going to be closer to 30. If we need to split those up, I think we have to play with those numbers And I can get some more information to you for sure on how
So
that.
I'm trying to get a feel for, is it, we're not, we don't have enough kids for this particular course, and so that course goes away, as opposed.
I think the pathways thing where a kid's going to choose a pathways class, those classes may be smaller. If they're focusing on, more of an agriculture pathway, compared to a criminal justice pathway. I think it varies with what the students are choosing to do as they go through it. That makes it a challenge on those course offerings. And then that's kind of the need for that course as it goes through.
Also, if you have a student. Go with it, or do they just select that, or how does that?
So the guidance counselor will push into a classroom where, for an example, 7th grade classroom, the counselor's already been in there. They've gone, hey, here are your course offerings. You're obviously going to need an English. You're going to need a social studies. You're going to need a health and PE, and then that gives them an elective. They can go band. They could do a music theory class. They could have a junior high art class. It gives them a couple options for an elective that they can choose. If there's only one of those offerings and there's only 2 of the other offerings, that's where the challenge becomes. So the kids do select their electives. As they get older, they have more choice as they go through, as long as they're showing they're passing those classes. They get to junior and senior year, and a lot of them have a lot more choices, especially with the work-based learning. We've got kids that are there every other day right now, or they're only there a half a day, because they're either at vocational school or they're doing a work-based learning. But for the majority, like our 7th and 8th graders, their schedule's pretty much set. They may get a choice of a 1 elective class.
So when you think about a purple day, 4 periods, and a gold day, 4 periods, and then you have teachers and these are their course offerings and we put them in enrollment. For example, high school band is only offered G2. One section of high school band. And so
Choir is one section.
choir is one section. We don't want to limit kids, again, the fine line, so much that they can't participate in the opportunities that they want to. Okay.
And they already have certain, like if a kid is morning vocational, they're not going to be able to take band, correct?
Right. But, and also, electives, by the time you take into consideration, the required courses, math, science, English, history, health and PE. And then if they're only open block based on whether they're in an honors class or whether they're in this math class, if they're only opening for an elective is P4 and you don't have an elective for them to take, then their schedule doesn't work out. And so that's why I say we would have to allow some grace to allow the administrator to say, do we have to run that course? And if so, then it may run with less than the 25 number. But I also think we need to be a little bit more mindful of, are there some of the classes that could be combined and not have such small numbers in the classes?
How many classes would you say you run there that have less than 10 students?
Less than 10.
What's considered small? I said single digits. Is it, we're looking at?
If you're looking like 12 to under, it kind of depends. I would say 5, somewhere around that number. I would say 5-ish that we've got around that 12 and under number. And it's usually because that group of students going to need some sort of differentiated, like maybe a math class where it's a little different than the other certain type of math class. They're going to get more attention at that. And it kind of helps with our special education teachers and allows them to push in at certain blocks. They're going to get the majority of their minutes met because they're going to have that teacher of record in that class with them. So that's kind of some of the reasons why those class sizes are smaller.
talking about non-certified staff, or did you have a question, Sandy?
I'm trying to figure out my question, but yeah, I have one. So of these, like the 12 and under that you mentioned, are they mostly elective side? They mostly core side? Where are they?
Like a math class, for an example.
Mostly
Some-
required,
those-
they're required courses.
We do have some electives that have smaller numbers. We have some, but year to year it changes. You know, we have a 0-hour class that may be of 10 to 12 because of a smaller class size, where next year it may be closer to 30 because of the students that are electing to take that class. So it's kind of year to year with it, but that's something that can be evaluated.
Back to you, Mrs. Schaefer. I know you were about to say something and
Yeah, just in, speaking with Mr. McCaslin, in evaluating all areas, we talked about assistance at the elementary as well, and I think that there is potential for opportunity to maybe reduce a assistant position at the high school as well, based on some different options. It's just going to be like, where are our situation right now is financially driven. And in the education, it's cutting out that 623,000 of expenditures. And so where do you want to lay the cards, basically? We talked about technology. We talked about staffing. We'll talk more administrators here in a minute, but where do we want to place those, and where can we start reducing off of that 623,000? And in my opinion, try not to make the impact in one area overall. So kind of on along the same lines of that, I think that my request would be to only right size. I said there may be potential for other opportunities for maybe reduced staffing through attrition in future years, based on the transition of what is going to be required for high school graduation, taking into consideration more work-based learning hours for kids. There's a diploma seal that they can earn up to 650 hours. So if they are meeting all of their graduation requirements of coursework, they can go towards that higher diploma and spend more hours in career work-based learning situations. So we won't have as many. There's a new requirement of computer science starting next year. And so I think we have all of one grade level that needs to take that requirement of computer science because it's the initial transition, but eventually we won't have such a large number. I think you also have an area in your PE classes and health classes that you can look at alternative ways to earn credit, and maybe reduce staffing there. That's a future conversation as well. But in the elementary, we talked last week too about, if we right size all of our classrooms today based on enrollment, we will cut more positions than what we financially need to right now. I think there are other areas. So my recommendation is that we only right size for what we need to meet that financial goal. And then in future years, look at right sizing over time through attrition, through some of these different aspects that have changed, and really evaluating those before we just fill a position and move on. Because if our enrollment is going to stay on the same projection, it's going to continue to decline unless something dramatically changes. And I don't know what that something is.
And we're projecting right now, anticipating what's that decline number for next school year?
So from October of this school year, to our February count, we were down 11 students. That's $81,000 just this year, loss in revenue. when we graduate our senior class, and if our kindergarten class stays at 57 right now, that is down 30 more students at 220,000. And so just from August 1 of last year, 2025, to August 1 of 2026, if nothing changes as it is today, we'll be down a total of 301,158.
Just in reduced enrollment.
Loss of students,
Loss of
enrollment.
What's our biggest class? Top to bottom.
Our sophomore class,
Heard that. How
100
big is it?
113.
So that's a little even more scary because in 2 years, they're gonna
Correct.
go out and we're looking, I mean, that's a 50 kid swing.
Correct.
But not only do we have to do this now, we have to be proactive and think where we're gonna be in 2 years, because I haven't run a tally on little kids in Hagerstown, but I haven't seen a bunch of that, a big population in that age group. And I don't mean to make light of it, but I mean, we have to be serious about where we're at. But I mean, that's coming down and staring down at us here shortly too, so. And I know that's not just us that's facing that. I mean, I heard on the news, Hamilton Southeastern has the same exact thing going on. And they said they didn't lose kids to other schools. They just have a declining population, and where we're at as a society, people just having less kids. And I mean, it's coming back here.
Well, and in our community, we talked about this last time too. You know, we have an aging population. We have people who have, myself included, no longer have children at home, and I still live in a 5-bedroom house. Unfortunately, probably the biggest buyer of my property is Amish, so they're not gonna help us anyway. So, you know, we do run into that where we have this aging population that's still living in their family home, and we don't have a lot of new homes coming into the area or affordable housing of some form. So we have that. Birth rates are down. Employment opportunities, you know, there's fewer of those. So you look at all of those economic elements that are coming together, and it's a perfect storm. And it's, unless somebody, thankfully, we've got somebody out tonight who just had a baby. So they just added to our future population.
Bringing up the.
He's helping us out. So, and I don't mean to make light of that, but there's some real factors here that aren't gonna, I don't see an immediate change or even something on the horizon that's peaking that. All right.
The right sizing conversation comes now, and we're trying to set ourselves up for success
And
going forward.
financially, and then back to what Mrs. Schaefer was saying earlier about, we want to make sure that the students who are here get the very best education of anywhere in the area. And I would like to say in the state. So, you know, I think we do have high aspirations, and there's a good reason for that. Okay.
Another area that I'll jump to if you guys are ready to move on to my administration. That was brought up in last week's work session too. So our current administration, we have two administrative positions that are at the junior senior high school. It's a 7 through 12 building. You know, when you take into account discipline and attendance and student safety and running a building from an operational standpoint, again, it's hard to compare apples to apples because some schools have a dean or a assistant over just their junior high, and maybe a principal who oversees 7 through 12 or middle school. At the elementary, two administrators, again, at a K through 6 building. If you remove a assistant principal out of this building, and I think about some of the challenges that we spoke about last week with discipline and just the additional support that kids are needing now, I think that just discipline itself day to day is a full-time job. Who are we going to call when a student needs some extra support? And I can go into more detail on job responsibilities for each of those positions if you have more questions. But then there's obviously two administrators at the district level. I think sometimes people don't understand what the director of learning role does. And in other areas, it equates to an assistant superintendent or a director of student services or anything else like that. But really, it's the catch-all. So ours oversees our preschool enrollment, getting our preschoolers enrolled, helping parents with the voucher system, and helping generate those dollars for the preschool. It also oversees the accreditation for vouchers, training for staff, oversees curriculum and the purchasing and adopting of curricular materials, monitors teacher licensing, application management, facilitating and record keeping of title grants, the high ability grant, special ed grant, and any future grant opportunities, communication with the Department of Ed, test vendors, parents, and students on assessments. Serves, which is a huge one, serves as the corporation test coordinator. And so uploads all of the accommodations for 9 through 12 SAT exams, biology and government iLearn exams. That was all new this year and is extremely time consuming because you have to submit every individual student. Those right now do not pull like some of our younger grade levels do for iLearn. Oversight of the high ability planning, identification of students, assessment of students, and facilitating the broad-based planning, submitting IDOE annual reports, and implementing new initiatives required by the DOE. So the formative assessment grant, staying up to date on what assessments are going to be covered for the formative assessment grant, what is going to meet our needs, and then submitting that grant, overseeing the universal screener process, the new initiative of accelerated math courses. So that's new this year, and that position has taken the lead on determining how that's going to look for our teachers within the classroom. The K-8 reading plan, English language learner compliance, is the point person for between the school and university for student teachers, college board administrator for our AP courses and assessments. Again, implementing the new computer science requirements. So did all of the professional development so that that person could professional develop our teacher who's going to teach that new course that is required. And so again, when you talk about where can you can remove, but everybody is assigned roles and duties right now. And so if we were to eliminate that position or an assistant principal position, then those duties need to move to somebody else. And it can happen, but job efficiency and attention to detail is going to go way down. I personally would say, and we don't have to discuss this today, but I talked about in the education fund, every penny, every dollar counts. And so my administrative contract my new contract will start, and that current contract has a already board approved increase. And so my recommendation would be is I stay at that current that we've already adjusted once after the fall negotiation session, and I do not take that increase, and that there would be a savings that we can already guaranteed savings put on the spreadsheet on the minus equation. So that is where we can cut it in administration. That is really what I had notes. So if there is anything left that I did not discuss or provide thoughts on as a follow-up from the last one, I'm happy to do so. This is what I will leave you with on my speech. I think we owe it to our school community and our employees to determine our decisions. I know they're hard decisions. But determine our decisions sooner rather than later, because we are potentially, I don't know how we can cut 623,000 and 300,000 without impacting people. Okay. Our people deserve to know those situations as soon as possible. Like if they're not going to have a job at Nettle Creek Schools next year, then now is the prime time for them to be finding a job at another school. We owe it to our employees to make these hard decisions. I don't want them to be rushed, but to make them sooner rather than later so that we can communicate and put people in the best situations we can moving forward.
Sean, what is the appropriate course of action to make that happen? We need to talk me through what we have to do to make this, to follow Ms. Schaefer's advice here.
I mean, what we're doing here tonight is obviously step 1A or 1B, since we've already had step 1A last week. And that's just us discussing, giving assignments to Mrs. Schaefer and her administration team to, come back to us with information and proposals. Once we've aligned and come to a decision and agreement on the path forward, then it's a matter of execution. I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think most of what we're needing to do here necessarily requires board action. Is there anything that?
Yes. If we
Changing appropriations.
Yeah, if we are going to make cuts on certified teaching positions, a teacher is assured that they have a position the following teaching year unless that is communicated, and our legal counsel would tell us that that needs to be approved in the board minutes. So we would need to take board action. What I would suggest is we need to make some decisions on where. We have some board policies and we'll need to reach out to legal guidance on, okay, once we've identified the areas that we need to cut, then and by what positions or how many dollars, then we work with our legal counsel to ensure that we are following board policy and looking at who those individuals will be impacted. I would ask that those individuals be notified. We're in the window of officially individuals May 1 to July 1, prior to that coming to public board action.
Right, and I think that's what I was saying. So we wouldn't take it to public meeting and approve it publicly before those impacted have already been notified.
So does our recommendations need to come in a work session, or does that happen? I guess that's what I'm asking.
I think if we're talking personnel, that's executive session. Correct?
Yeah, if in a work session, we can talk about general, but if we're going to talk about specific, that needs to be a work session. I have a hard time executive session. Thank you. I have a hard time finding out or letting somebody know through a public work session that they won't have a position next year.
I totally agree. I just want to make sure. I agree. I don't want to drag this out. It's a very tough decision. It's not a rush decision, but I'm a person that you analyze the facts and let's just, let's do what has to be done so everyone can handle the situation properly. And so that's why I asked, because I need to know if we need to have another work session to do this, and let's get that on the books. If not, let's start.
In my mind, and you guys can provide feedback, we've talked about a lot of different information. I think you need to digest it. I think we need to set an executive session date, and we need to take all of that information and leave that executive session with, here are the areas that we are eliminating or cutting. And then I worked with our team of directors and administrators to have those conversations. And then all of this needs to be board approved by July 1, I believe, but I can clarify that.
And for me, summary for me, and I think it's a lot of it's reiterating what you just said. You know, we've looked at nearly everything within our budget in the past 2 work sessions. Everything of, you know, not down to the pennies, but everything that has some possibility of giving us some value back. I think what we can say is there's not fluff there. I mean, you know, there's not obvious things that it's easy to say, hey, that's not doing anything for our school system. It's not doing anything for our school or our students. You know, there's no easy things like that to pick out and say, we're cutting that. But I think we can also say there's not enough in, you know, non-personnel items, you know, software and gas and things like, there's just not enough there to make up the dollar amounts that we need to. So we are forced to look at personnel. And, you know, as much as I hate to say that, you know, that directly, you know, we've talked about it all night, you know, what provides the benefit to our students, what fulfills our mission. And we all know it's primarily people. So to have to go against that is really difficult, but the numbers don't lie. You know, it's what we have in front of us. And I think we're going to have to make some of those difficult decisions.
Can you walk us through just like a high level or whatever level you feel appropriate, walk us through, other than the general targets for the classes, what does that really equate to in relationship to current and then future? Because you mentioned earlier, future would be through attrition and things like that. So do you have like something there you can kind of, as a synopsis or a summary, like what does that look like? You can, or is that something you're still formulating
You
with
mean
your
based on
administrators?
forecasts of
Well,
student population?
based on like targeting those class sizes.
So
And knowing
if
we've already had some movement occur, where do we land now? Where are we?
if I think that I understand your question,
Sorry.
if we right-sized elementary class sizes as they stand today, that would be 5 teaching positions. One has already left that we won't hire back, so now we're down to 4.
Okay.
I don't know that my recommendation would be to right size every single one of those. We could, that would get us a large chunk, but I think there are other areas so that, again, one place doesn't feel all of the impact that we've talked about, that we could also consider cutting to meet that financial goal. When I think about future years, so our 2nd and 3rd grade probably have the highest class sizes, 87 and 79. As those move through, and if the incoming, so for example, 71 hypothetically, let's say, is in the 1st grade class. Well, if we right size that grade level this year or for next year and take it down to 3 sections, when they go to be 2nd graders the following year, they will not need 4 sections. So as people leave future, either through retirements, finding different jobs, we need to be very proactive on do we absolutely need to fill a position? And so if we could right size by 4 more right now, maybe we only choose 2, but if we have a retirement next year, let's not hire that position back. Let's right size another classroom so that we're not sitting in this situation again.
Right,
I'm not really sure that answers your question because I'm not giving you financial numbers.
right, understand.
And I assume all of that means that we're probably gonna need to see more flexibility as far as grade levels and things like that. So more teachers moving around, or like with those bigger class sizes following. I think we've talked about the idea of potentially having like a floater teacher that, K through 3 or something, 4, 5, 6, within those grade levels floats along with the larger class sizes. But I don't see how you get around that without doing something like that.
Yeah, I mean, if you choose the area to right size in first grade, for example, that doesn't necessarily, based off of our RIF policy, mean that one of those current teachers in first grade, it does not have a position. So it very well could mean that there are some shifts and there will be future shifts based on the cohorts as they move through. Same thing at the junior, senior high school. I said there is a high need for the computer science class as we transition to the new diploma. There's not going to be as high of a need in future years because we're not trying to make that transition. It will be more of a study. And so does that warrant that many sections that are on the master schedule this year for that specific class? And so while there may be an opportunity for one position at the junior, senior high school this year, again, maybe there's another position or opportunity to right side your senior high school next year. I think it is not staying set in our ways and every year evaluating how can we think outside the box, continue to offer more with less. Because that's honestly going to be the challenge of public education unless something changes in the future.
Offer opportunity for public comment.
I'm good with that.
Okay, so if there is anybody that would like to address the board, we'll move to that public comment.
I would just ask tonight that Braden, will you move one of those mics, please? And if you choose, just come to the podium and speak. Because that was another piece of feedback is our community members could not hear during public comment.
Thanks for opening this session up again as last week. I know there's a lot of teachers we really appreciate it, including the ones who are at home watching. By the way, Lisa Bang, you didn't know who I was, first grade teacher. And the only comment I was going to leave, I'm glad Emily's addressed it. My biggest concern was right sizing 5 sections in 1 year. And Mr. Lieberman, you made the comment right away of quantitative versus qualitative. And I know we have all been put in this impossible situation because of decisions being made 50 miles away by people who aren't in a classroom. I get that. We recognize you're having to make decisions when you're not in a classroom. These people are. And so I represent them tonight as well, just to point out quantitative versus qualitative. Class size is directly linked to student achievement. Class sizes go up, scores go down. And Mrs. Schaefer said it perfectly. Every year, we're going to be expected to do more with less. And again, that decision's being put on us from legislative factors, not here. But we have to do what we have to do. And I hate to say, well, we raise class sizes, we're going to have to lower classroom expectations, but it is going to be a reality. It is going to impact your high quality instruction. I've been here 18 years. The largest class I ever had my first year, I got up to 27 briefly, dropped back down to 26. And I had come out of college thinking, oh, you teach with differentiation, small groups. You can't do that with 26 and even 25. If I've got a small group of, say, high ability students, they come to me in first grade, got those 5 at the table. That's 20 students out there doing stations, not getting that direct instruction. Is it going to be quality? No, it's not. And if we're also looking at reducing instructional assistants, that's even a bigger impact on the instruction within the room, because then she can't run a teaching table while I'm trying to provide small group support. So I'm grateful you've brought up that maybe we can find ways that it's not 5. I wish it could be 0. I know it can't be. I just ask on behalf of my colleagues that we just keep that in mind, quantitative versus qualitative, and we have to think direct student impact because kids come first. So thank you for your time tonight, and thank you to all my teammates that are here too.
Lynn Meek, I think everybody knows me here for the most part, but teacher at the high school, CTA president, all that good stuff. Just one comment from me, and that's I don't envy any of these decisions, and I appreciate all the time people have taken and all the cuts people have already made and the thoughts that they've encountered. And, you know, people are on 5 hours of these public meetings. So I appreciate everybody's time. I think the only thing that I want to stress is I do think this is something we all have to own a little bit. This is something we all have to feel a part of. And the idea of it being, or even kind of saying 5 at the elementary, I think is hard. It's got to be something that doesn't destroy the culture of our school. And if it seems like it's targeted, which I know is not the intent, but everybody's got to find that place where they can do things. And I just want to make sure that it's level and equitable as it can be. Understand not everything is fair. Not everybody can win. But I think for the culture and climate of our building, it's important that, you know, everybody feels like they own a little bit of the cuts. That's really the only comment I have tonight. Thank you.
Anyone else? Please feel comfortable if worried about coming up to the podium. We want to hear from you guys.
We really do.
Yeah.
Your words are important.
Hello, I'm Abby Klein. I teach 6th grade math. Something I can attest to as a newer teacher is that I already feel confident in my 2nd year with the material that I'm teaching. And I feel that I have gotten stronger with it, more comfortable, that I'm able to meet my students' needs better. When we think about right sizing, when these classes move and then you're going to need another section, it's hard to think about having to move all the time because you never truly get, comfortable and the best at what you're doing. Not that we couldn't do it. We're all professionals and we're going to work hard at whatever we're given, but that's something to take into account too. I admire our mentor and master teachers. I think they do a wonderful job. but something, you know, could we share a master teacher between the elementary and the high school, where we can still get that support and professional development, but rather than two positions, it could just be one that's shared between both buildings. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Bruce Swallow, fifth grade teacher at the elementary. I've been around for a while and I told Mrs. Schaefer last year when I came back here that I really enjoyed the NIET process. I thought that it made me a better teacher last year, even after 25 years in the classroom. But after I saw the the money that was attached to NIET, sorry, I got to thinking about that real hard. And it's a lot of money. And I just kind of saw it as a kind of a luxury. And I don't know if any other schools in Wayne County have it, but when we started talking about right sizing and class sizes and riffing teachers, I just got to thinking, you know, when I watched you guys last week, I got to watch you Sunday morning because I wasn't able to be here. But when I start listening to, you know, the days of 16, 17 in the classroom are gone, I just got to thinking, you know, we've got two master teachers that they help the teachers, which help the classroom. I get that, but should we start looking at a plan to phase those out? Because when I start looking at the prices, $50,000 down to, you know, $17,000 this year, that's a lot of money. And, you know, we're coming into some really tough times. And I'm just a money guy, and looking at that money on the paper, is it worth that right now in our educational time to spend instead of keeping our classrooms smaller and keeping our teachers in the classroom instead of getting rid of some of these teachers that could be sitting out here today? I would just ask that you put the pencil to the paper and do some figuring and just see what it costs to keep that around. Again, it's a great program. I truly enjoyed going through it. I know that sounds weird from a teacher saying that an evaluation program is awesome, but I did it 3 times last year and 3 times this year. And I don't know, I may have Mrs. Locke come back and do it 3 times next year if I'm still around. But it did make me a better teacher, but I think, you know, I think it's a luxury. I think it's a lot of money to pay for that type of evaluation system compared to keeping our classrooms small and our teachers in the classroom. So put the pencil to the paper and just see what it costs and see if we can keep the teachers around a little bit longer.
Anyone else? What else do you need from us tonight?
I would like us to, maybe after we adjourn, determine a date when we are all available for an executive session to make those decisions.
No other public comment? Any other closing thoughts by any board members?
And I'll just say that As a school board member, I haven't grown up in this town, but I feel part of it. It's not a decision that I take lightly, what we have to do here. You know, when I started on this school board, I came in during COVID. I thought deciding whether kids had to wear masks was a hard decision. That looks pretty minor right now compared to what we have to do. And it's not a decision I take lightly. I see the teachers of my kids in this room, and you know, it's important to make sure this school is absolutely the best it can be in this community. So, you know, and we've said it a bunch, but it is a tough decision, and we will take all the information that was put forth and make the absolute best decision that we can as we move forward.
May I say something? On behalf of all of the teachers, I'm just asking that you make the decision, like Mrs. Schaefer said, sooner rather than later. It's not fair to these teachers. Ms. Schaefer has said it over and over. We don't hire bad teachers. We have excellent teachers here. And if this has to happen, they deserve the opportunity to be able to get a position that is a good position.
I want to clarify. I am not throwing board members under the bus. They have been working very diligently. They know that this is a very timely decision. They also know I need to continue to say that. I did not share that because they have not been working diligently and timely on this decision. They certainly have devoted more time than they probably have altogether since being on the board. We just need to continue to hear that it has to be timely decisions.
Yeah, I agree, Ms. Slaughter. Let's go.
I actually have 2.5 people. You're half a person with Amber, and that half person does all of our data reporting for the state. She's the one that gets all of our money for us. So she has a very important job. Can't forget about that.
Any other closing comments?
I appreciate you all coming. I
Yeah.
notice a lot of you are very red, and I know what that stands for. I'm a nurse educator, and I have the heart of an educator, and I am really glad I'm sitting this way and I don't have to look. I love you all, and I just want you to know we take it very seriously. I don't know how many times I cried last week, so I'm just take it very seriously. You guys educated my kids. You continue to educate my kids. I'm amazed at how much they come home and talk about. One of my kiddos a couple weeks ago said something about the Strait of Hormuz being closed and blah, 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 and all this high level stuff. And I was like, where did you hear that? I thought they must have gotten it off, the news or something. No, current events, they were talking about it in class. I mean, it's really incredible what happens. And it's all because of you.
Right. If nothing else, I'll just close with thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you those that stood up to speak. Thank you for those that provided information for us. This is tough, and more importantly, thank you for what you guys do every day here at the school. We'll get through this. Mrs. Locke will do it as quickly as we can, but also take the time to make sure we're thinking through all possibilities and what it looks like going forward. So appreciate you coming. We'll close the meeting at 8:53.